In this video, we're going to be covering the best loadouts after the Season 2 Reloaded update in Call of Duty Warzone. That's going to include the best long range, close range, snipers, and sniper supports all in this video. The entire video will be timestamped, but I really recommend you take the time to listen all the way through. So I'm going to be explaining each of these guns' strengths and weaknesses, as there's not really just a clear cut, this is the best gun for each category. Each one has its own perks. So let's first start with the long range meta here, and we are going to jump over to ggs.ai, which is my website. Again, this is ggs.ai. You guys can jump on here and sort and compare weapons yourself if you want to, but let's look at the time to kill chart here. And I've got kind of my rough top 6 weapons selected here. And the first one I want to talk about is the Ram 7 in the green line. As you're going to see, it has the fastest TTK up to about 30 meters or so, but even up to 50 meters, it is still pretty much the best option. However, after 50 meters, this thing really falls off in terms of its damage, becomes a little bit of a pea shooter. It did get a nerf in the Season 2 Reloaded update. They basically just nerfed its range. So these range drop-offs hit even sooner than they used to. If we scroll down here, there's a few other tools we can look at, like weighted TTKs, expected accuracies, but I just want to really quickly touch on some of these other strengths and weaknesses. The big thing with the Ram right here is its recoil rating is a lot lower than some of these other ones that are rated 5 out of 5. Otherwise, this gun is really good all around, and basically, if you can handle its recoil for resurgence, it's probably the best AR out there still today. Now, as we do these loadouts, I'm going to give you guys several different options here. This right here is like your all around kind of any player should be able to use this. You do ideally need to run iron sights on this build because we need to max out the recoil control attachments with this gun for it to be viable, I think. So the Cassis brake is one of the best muzzles I like to use on assault rifles on your long range guns, because it helps your horizontal recoil so much, but also your firing aim stability. And basically this drastically reduces the visual recoil of this gun. It just makes it so much smoother to shoot. Now you can go with the Zem, but the Zem hurtens our bullet velocity, which is generally something you don't want to do on your long range guns. You also can elect to just go with the regular old VT7 Spiritfire suppressor, and this is still very good, but the recoil control is a little bit harder, so I'd only recommend this if you have very good recoil control. Overall, I do not recommend using the Jack BFB anymore, because the penalties when you use this are massive to your handling and also a big bullet velocity penalty, even though it does help your recoil a ton. Now, there's one other build that I'll recommend here, and that is if you switch the Core Mark barrel out for the Cronin Headwind Long. The reason for this is this one gives us more range and more bullet velocity. If we go and look back at the Core Mark, not as much range, but it gives us more recoil. So essentially what I'm saying is, if you struggle with recoil or you just have kind of average to good, stick with the Core Mark. But if you are a very high level player, use the Cronin Long Wind paired with that Cassis brake. And that build, this build right here, is what the majority of the top ranked players are running in Resurgence Ranked. Next one I want to talk about is the Holger 556, which is going to be the blue line, and it did receive a very nice buff to its damage in this update. At close to mid-range, it's kind of right in par with a lot of these other guns, but you're going to see it has a very nice damage range. Damage range doesn't drop off till 46 meters, and it continues on for a while. It's just one of those like all-around good assault rifles, because one of the main advantages of it, if we look at over in this first row, a 5 out of 5 recoil rating, just super easy to use and pretty good all around. Its only big limiting factor is its damage per mag. You only have a 40 round mag with it, so it is going to struggle in that department if you're going to run trios or quads, especially if you like to split off on your own. So this is the more aggressive build, which is going to have that Cassis brake and make it super low recoil. Now, one thing you might see that's a little bit weird is I'm actually running high velocity and not high grain. The reason for that is high velocity gives us a better boost to our bullet velocity, and that is one of a little bit of a weakness to this gun, and it hurts our range. But because this gun has such good range, I don't really feel like you need to run high grain and get that recoil penalty. You could go either or, but I think high velocity is a slightly better option. Now, if you don't like the iron sights on this gun, take off high velocity altogether, and I'd recommend going with the Jack glassless optic. If you're going to run an optic, I think this is by far your best bet. This is one that you can unlock on one of the weekly challenges. Choreo Eagle Eye 2.5 is fine, but it just has a lot more visual recoil. And then again, you can also feel free to switch out the Cassis again back to something like the VT7 Spiritfire if you want to stay suppressed. The recoil on this is still not bad at all. Next, in the purple line, the SOA Subverter battle rifle. This is the new gun that was added in Season 2 Reloaded, and you're going to see its time to kill is the second fastest here, up to about 29 meters. But even beyond, it is still one of the best time to kill guns at more of these mid-range fights, and even at long range, it is still very, very competitive. Now, we were able to find a build that we think the recoil is very manageable, and we've got it rated as a 5 out of 5. But this build is an iron sight build. It's another kind of slight downside to it. Its other weakness is because it's a battle rifle, its handling, like its ADS time, sprint to fire time, and reload speed are going to be a little bit slower. So this is kind of your all-around balanced build that's going to feature low recoil but also good range. However, if you want to make this even lower recoil, switch that spirit fire for, you guessed it, the Cassis Break. You could go with the Zem compensated flash hider as well, but generally I just like the Cassis Break better because I think it smooths it out more for longer range guns. If you don't like the iron sights, switch the stock then for the Jack Glasses optic. That's a great option as well. If you want the absolute lowest recoil gun in the game, the SVA 545 on burst mode, the red line here has basically no recoil. Like, I'm not even kidding, it has no recoil. You will see though its time to kill is much slower compared to some of these other guns. However, if we scroll down here and look at the expected accuracies at 91%, basically that's saying because of how low that recoil is, you're going to be far more accurate compared to something like a Ram 7, for example. And then if we scroll down here and look at some of its stats in this second to last row, of course at TTK, not very good. This thing needs like a 10 out of 5 recoil rating because of how low recoil it is. It actually has very good handling and mobility all around, great damage per mag, also with that 60 round mag. So minus the time to kill, this gun is phenomenal in every other category. So because this has such little recoil on burst mode, again, you need to toggle this to burst or single fire essentially, even though it shoots like a burst because of that hyper burst feature. We don't have to run something like a VT7 Spirit Fire. You don't need to run like a Cassis Break. We just want to maximize our range and bullet velocity. So that's why we're going to go with the Sonic, even though it's going to hurt our recoil control. I promise you, it doesn't matter with how little recoil this thing has. You can go Corio Eagle Eye 2.5, but again, I am running pretty much the Jack Glasses optic on all of my long range builds. This thing is decent in full auto as well, I just want to say, but I think it is a far better option in burst because the recoil is so much less. So now we're going to look at the BP50 in the orange line, and the BP50 is probably the most underrated long range gun in the game right now. It has just overall, it's super versatile, great handling, and the time to kills are very solid, very competitive, kind of in the middle at close range. At mid range, it is very solid as well. It does start to fall off a little bit at longer ranges, but I think for resurgence, if you don't like the recoil of the Ram, the BP50 would be a great replacement instead. And you'll notice it has the second highest accuracy on this chart, basically because its recoil is very easy to manage. It just has that very poor damage range, like shown in those time to kill charts. Also, damage per mag and reload speed, not very good. So again, not a gun I'd recommend if you're going to run trios and quads, especially if you're trying to split off and take multiple people on at once. Pretty standard build again for the BP50. Now the iron sights are very solid on this gun, so if you don't want to run something like the Jack Glasses optic, take that off and put on something like the Forebear heavy stock. You also could elect to take off the Spirit Fire for like a Cassis Break, but because of that range being so bad, I think I would recommend keeping that on so that you get that extra range. One final option, you could switch off the optic for something like high grain to boost that range, since that is a weakness of this gun. And then last but not least, I do want to touch on the Bruin MK9 and the Yellow 9, which did get a decent buff in the Season 2 Reloaded update. You're going to see close range TTK is kind of in the middle with everything else, but at long range, at past about 53 meters, it does have the fastest time to kill here. And essentially, if you like to play the bigger map, maybe like Urzikstan, or maybe you're just not a super aggressive player, I think Bruin MK9 is a great option. And you will see that it has the lowest accuracy of all these guns because of its recoil, and its recoil rating is quite low at a 2.6. Now you will see the ADS time is a little bit higher here at 529, but I've got a different build that I think I like a little bit better that we just need to get updated on the site, and let me show you here. So this Bruin MK9 build will actually have a ADS all the way down to 406. Now, that was one of the things that got buffed in the update, and this build, especially with the Cassis Break, does make the recoil a lot smoother overall. And we're not running a barrel, instead going to run high grain because the barrels kill your aim down sight speed. So that's why we are doing that. Again, great option, I think, for resurgence, even though its long range time to kill is so good. I just think some of these other guns are a little bit better, so I would put this one kind of near the bottom of my list, even though so many people are hyping this up like it is one of the best things out there right now. All right, so now we're going to switch over and talk about the close range meta, or the best SMGs. And not a whole lot changed in the Season 2 Reloaded update. There was only a few minor changes, but let's jump into this. I'm going to start first with the HRM9. You're going to see close range TTK, it is a little bit farther in the back. There are several other options that do kill faster than it. However, think about the HRM here, very solid damage range, but it's dominant in everything else, which is why it's been probably the most popular SMG. One cool thing you can do here is we can add our sprint to fire time into this. And when you add the sprint to fire time, the HRM is actually going to be the fastest time to kill. Now, I know you're probably like, okay, WSP9, it's faster though. What are you saying, TCap? The WSP9 also has has an open bolt delay that we aren't adding into here, and we need to add that into the website so it's a little bit more accurate, but it has an open bolt delay of 50 milliseconds. So it would actually sit closer to in line with the Ram 9. So once we do that, the Ram 9, or the HRM 9 plus Sprintifire does have the fastest time to kill. So if you're an aggressive player, it's very important. Accuracies are very solid on it as well. That's why right over here in this left side, got a 5 out of 5 recoil rating, 5 out of 5 mobility rating, and it is just dominant in basically every other category. So this has been my go-to HRM, and this is probably my favorite overall SMG right now because it's just good in all situations. If you want to stay suppressed, switch that Zem back to something like the Sonic suppressor. On SMGs, I do tend to run the Zem and not something like a Cassis or an equivalent to the Cassis, just because I like that vertical recoil more for SMGs and also those shortened radar pings. The bullet velocity penalty is not as big of a deal for those SMGs either. So next, the WSP9 in orange. And again, if without the open bolt delay, the WSP9 is insane. A 0.601 time to kill, has insanely good range, and also all of its other stats are great as well. But if we do factor in that open bolt delay, which is basically when you first pull the trigger, there's a 50 millisecond delay until that first bullet comes out, it does drop that time to kill back farther. So it's kind of hard to equate it into the time to kill because it's not a one-to-one, correlation that its time to kill will be that much slower, but it's just something you have to mention and bring up, like I said. But the accuracy, the best accuracies of all these SMGs, because it's just very low recoil, very easy to use, and you will see recoil rating, mobility rating, all of these are great. Only really big downside to the WSP9 is a slower fire rate, so it can be less forgiving if you're missing your shots, but also the fastest sprint to fire time of these guns, which kind of helps make up for the open bolt delay. So this is my WSP9 loadout here, and one unique thing about this, I do want to talk about the barrel. This short light barrel does hurt our recoil, but gives us some really nice mobility and handling bonuses, which is why I do run it. Now, if you wanted to run this as like a sniper support or just have more range in general, you could totally switch to the reckless long barrel because its only penalty is sprint to fire, and its sprint to fire is already so fast that it's not that big of a deal. Just know you will struggle a little bit more in very close quarters fights if you elect to do that. Again, running the Zem, feel free to switch to the Sonic suppressor if you want to stay suppressed. Iron sights are okay on the WSP9, but generally I do prefer an optic. And again, if you don't want to run like an MK3, feel free to put on something like the Jack Glassless, especially if you're going to use this as a sniper support. Next, we'll talk about the Ram 9 in purple, and you will see it is the second fastest time to kill with a time to kill of 0.585 at close quarters. It does have a very quick damage range drop off though. So after 10 meters, that time to kill starts to drop off, and it's really dominant at close range, but because of its recoil and time to kill, it does struggle a little bit more at mid range, making it not quite as versatile. The accuracy ratings are pretty solid on this, kind of right there in the middle. So one of the big weaknesses of the Ram 9 here in the middle though is one, that damage range, but two, its sprint to fire time is a bit slower than some of these others. So if you get caught sprinting, to bring that gun down, you have to then add that into the equation. So when we go back up here and look at that weighted time to kill plus sprint to fire, you're going to see it is slower than both the WSP9 and HRM9. Now this build I did recently start running, and that is because they buffed this Speedway short barrel, and it used to have a really bad penalty to your aim down sight speed, but with this build we can get the sprint to fire down a little bit more to 99 milliseconds. Now we are not running any sort of muzzle on this, so no Zem or suppressor, but this barrel does help some with our recoil, so it is an okay trade-off, but then penalizing our range. So it's kind of a tricky thing. If you are not getting caught in a sprint, you're not a super aggressive player, this thing is your best gun for pure close range fights though. So still a fabulous option in the game right now. Moving on to the AMR9 in green, which is the fastest time to kill SMG in the game, and it also has some insanely good range. However, it does have some kind of big flaws to it, and that is because when we factor in sprint to fire, its time to kill is the slowest because it has just a bad sprint to fire time. Accuracies are also good, but not great for it, although I would not consider its recoil bad in any meaning. I think we do need to adjust this recoil rating of 1.5 because it's really not that bad. I think it's a pretty average recoil type gun, but you're going to see its handling is very poor. Sprint to fire of 132. Reload speed is not great. Mobility is not great. So if you're not a very aggressive player, you like to just, kind of play and hold angles and stuff like that, AMR9 probably your best bet. But if you like to use movement, not going to be your best option. Now this build, we are able to get the sprint to fire down to 122 with this option here. And we're going to get some of these builds updated on the website. It just had a lot going on. So you will see these data reflect a little bit more accurately on the website. But one thing that's nice is this barrel has an integrated suppressor. So although it doesn't doesn't look like we're suppressed, we will be suppressed with this barrel, and it does actually help our sprint to fire time and handling quite a bit. Hurts our range, but still a damage range of 20 meters, which is still best in class of these SMGs. The iron sights are horrible on the AMR, so definitely recommend going with an optic. Again, feel free to switch that to the Jag glassless if you wanted. Now, I get asked a lot about people running this with the no stock. I think the only decent build with the no stock is take off the barrel, put on the buffer tube no stock, and then I think if you go with something like the Zem or even the Jag, the recoil is manageable but not great, and you're actually also going to take off, I'm sorry, the solar flare for that. So I don't really like this build because the recoil I think is just too much, and even with that no stock, still actually a slower sprint to fire than that other build at 128, but we do get much better mobility if you really want to try it. But again, there's better options if you want to use movement builds. One final build to look at is the Striker 9. You will see it has the slowest time to kill of all of these SMGs at close to mid range, which kind of takes it out of the meta conversation, but it is still a very good option. I wanted to throw it in there as well because it's just easy to use, good mobility, good fire rate, all that good stuff. So if we look at the build here, a few different options you can run it. This one is kind of a little bit more of an aggressive build, and you could feel free to take the optic off and run the iron sights, as they are not bad at all. If that was the case, I would probably say go with something like high grain instead of the optic, or if you want a lower recoil option, switch out this stock for the Recon series stock, and if you want to say suppress, you can switch the Zem for the Sonic. Again, a great option, but I would not classify it as a top tier meta option. Now, before we wrap up, I do want to quickly touch on the best two snipers in the game. There's really only two snipers worth using right now. Number one, the XRK Stalker. This one now has a one-shot headshot capability up to whatever its effective damage range is. This is pretty much the max range we can get it to, 75.7 meters. So if you headshot someone up to 75 meters, it will down them. Quick FYI, if you go into the firing range with this, and even if you put it on 3 plates, it will not one-shot. The firing range is incorrect when it comes to its damage range values. I get asked this every time, and people are like, you're lying, it's not a one-shot. I promise you, it is a one-shot headshot in-game. Firing range is not accurate. This gun did get a slight buff to its ADS speed. So with this build, 523 millisecond ADS speed, which for Warzone 3 sniping, that's actually decently fast. It's nothing what we used to have, with like the Kar 98 or Swiss K31, but this option, good range and pretty good handling that you can use this in a relatively aggressive situation. Now, if you want a sniper that has an unlimited range for a one-shot headshot, then you have to use the Cat AMR, and you do not have to use explosive ammo or anything like that for it to be a one-shot. It is unlimited range, one-shot, but the downside to it, slower handling, so about almost 100 milliseconds slower ADS speed with this build. Also, the bullet velocity is not quite as well, a little bit under 1,000 bullet velocity, still not bad at all, but the Stalker I think is like 12 or 1300, so that gun is just a lot easier to, because you don't have to lead your shots with compared to the Cat AMR. So in short, if you're playing Resurgence, definitely go with the XRK Stalker, but if you're playing big map, the Cat AMR probably the better option. Really quick, when it comes to sniper supports, there are really 3 main SMGs I'd say to use for sniper supports: the WSP-9 and the HRM-9, and then also the AMR-9. All 3 of those are great options. I would probably say that the WSP-9 is my #1 favorite, or this HRM is a close second, and this build is going to be a little bit different where we switch to the long barrel, and then we're also switching to the rear grip for recoil control. That way this is just much easier to use. Also the sonic suppressor, so switching out a few attachments there. You could take the rear grip off with the DR6 hand stop if you want a little bit better mobility, like if you're playing Resurgence or something like that, but this is definitely one of my favorite sniper sports overall. So that is going to wrap things up, guys. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to check out GGs.ai, as you can go on that website and look at all sorts of more stats and compare stuff more if you'd like to do that. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.